Hi, my name is Trisha and welcome to my channel, the Denim Duchess, because I am a quarter Dutch. And this channel is going to be focusing on showing you how to take old worn out blue jeans or maybe jeans with holes in them or whatnot and turning them into beautiful quilts and some other creations as well. So today we're going to be looking at how to start making this, I just kind of call it an abstract rose quilt. Now this is more of like a scrappy quilt, so we don't need a whole lot of whole jeans. We're mainly going to be using scraps that are left over from other quilt projects. So this probably isn't the project to start with, like this probably shouldn't be your first quilt. You should do some of the other quilts first that I have videos available for. And once you've done a couple other quilts, like maybe the cat quilt or like a block quilt, something like that, you should have some leftover scraps from that will be perfect for creating this abstract rose quilt. So again, you don't need a lot of whole jeans for this. You do need a few just for these connecting pieces between the roses. There's going to be kind of like borders around the roses. So you need a few pairs of jeans that are about the same shade. Here where I live, it's the Wranglers. There's kind of a shade of Wrangler that's pretty popular. So I'm using some old Wranglers for my connecting strips to connect the roses, and then I do have a pretty large tote full of scraps. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my tote of scraps. I do have a little bit of organization here. Like I've got totes for like 8-inch squares, 6-inch squares, my cat design that I like. I have a tote for pockets, some strips, and then I do have a tote just for scraps. So I'm going to get my scrap tote out, and there is kind of a variety in here. Some of the scrap pieces are actually fairly big. You know, like this one, this is actually a pretty big scrap, but some of them are quite small. You know, they were too small to use in, say, my cat quilt or whatnot, and so anything that was just left over from other projects that I couldn't use in other projects gets thrown into here, and that'll be perfect for creating this abstract rose quilt. Now you can see that my sewing room is not very big. It's actually the guest room, and in the guest room, pretty much what you see is what you get. There's not a lot off camera. So we've got a queen-size bed in the guest room, but we don't have a lot of overnight guests, so it doesn't get used much. And there's probably only about 2 feet to the wall here, only about 2.5 feet to the wall over there, probably only 2.5 feet to the wall over on this side. Now over on this side there is a long dresser with my stacks and stacks of blue jeans towering above, up along the wall. So I do have a stack of blue jeans over there. I do have my totes back here. My finished quilts I put in totes under the bed. So under the bed I have some of my finished quilts, so that works out nicely. And then I do have my ironing board back here, and then just a card table with my Singer heavy duty 4452 sewing machine, and some of my supplies out here that you'll need for this quilt. So you don't have to have a big sewing space or a fancy sewing room to still enjoy, you know, repurposing and recycling denim and blue jeans into beautiful quilts. So that's something that I really like about it. I like that I'm not paying for a bunch of fabric. You know, usually if you ask for old wholly stained blue jean donations, usually you can get some people willing to give you their discarded blue jeans, and it's a win-win because they're not going into the trash, and you don't have to buy fabric, and you can create some beautiful quilts. So you don't have to have a big fancy space. You don't have to put a lot of money into the fabric. You do need a good heavy-duty sewing machine. You do need a queen-size cotton flat sheet. For this particular quilt, you'll need heavy-duty fusible interfacing, and I like the 16-inch because that's about the right size for our squares. I like having my Fiskars cutting mat and my Fiskars 2-foot by 6-inch ruler. The heavy duty scissors, I mean blue jeans, they are heavy, so you'll need some heavy duty scissors. I just use the universal sewing needles. I don't use the denim needles, surprisingly, in my machine. Some Gutermann 100% cotton thread. Probably wouldn't hurt to have a seam ripper. A black Sharpie, and eventually you'll need some pins when we finish the quilt. But that is everything that you need. You don't need a huge space. It is kind of handy having this queen size bed, because I don't have to get down on the floor or put up tables. And if I did happen to have an overnight guest, I could just gather up my quilt blocks, put my card table away, put my sewing stuff away, and it could return back into a guest room. Alright, we are going to take a closer look at what we need to actually start making our abstract rose quilt blocks. So we are going to need to have 20 of these rosettes, and they're about 16 inches by 16 inches, so they're 16-inch square rosette pieces. And then we're also going to need all of these little connector strips that are going to be connecting all 20 of those rosettes, or those little abstract roses. But let's focus in on these 16-inch square. So the back of these is just heavy interfacing. So I like to buy it in the rolls that are already about 16 inches. I think it's like 16.1 inches, so like very close to 16 inches. I might square them up or cut them down to just 16 inches square. So once you have a roll of this 16.1 inch heavy interfacing, then you can just roll it out until you have 16 inches. I've got this nice cutting mat here. So I've got this gray cutting mat, and then I've also got a 2-foot by 6-inch ruler. So what I do is I just roll it out until I have the 16 inches on my mat. So you can see I'm at the 16 inches down here, and then I would just throw this on here and then use a Sharpie to mark along that 16 inches. And then you just have to make one cut and you've got your square. So I've already got quite a few squares cut out already over here. I'll have to double check and see if I've got what I need to finish up the 20. And then after you have these, you just grab one. You'll grab one of these, and then we'll go over to our scraps and just start kind of in the middle and sew our rows. Okay, so we've got our 16-inch square piece of fusible interfacing, and I like to do the heavy. Now with the interfacing, fusible interfacing, I should say, there's kind of like if you feel there's kind of like a smoother side and more of a bumpy side. You want the bumpy side up, and that's what you're going to be sewing your denim scraps to. Oh, and then I was just going to show you this. Once you've sewn your denim scraps, if you have any little bitty pieces that are even too small to use on this, I know my daughter enjoys if I just give her, little scrap pieces of blue jeans, and then she takes the really teeny tiny scraps and lays them out, and then I just top stitch over, and she gets to have her own little abstract scrappy quilt. So that's what I had that there, was just to show you that every little bitty piece can be used, especially if you have a little kid who likes to quilt with you. So again, you'll need your 16-inch square heavy fusible interfacing with kind of the rough side up, and then in my heavy duty, the 4452 Singer sewing machine, I have got this 100% cotton Gutermann thread is the one that I like, and then I'm just using the Singer Universal 9014, 90/14 size needle. I've tried using denim needles and they seem to not be any better than just the Universal 9014, so I just use the Universal 9014, and then my 100% cotton Gutermann thread. Okay, so I'm just going to grab a scrap. Like, here's a scrap from my bucket. Now this is a little big to start, plus there's kind of some stains. I can kind of see some stains here, so I'm just going to kind of just cut, maybe like, cut that off. You know, this can go in my kiddo's pile. She can throw some scraps on top of that. But I kind of like the looks of this, so I'm just going to kind of throw that in the middle-ish. Now, when I throw it on, I kind of like to have it off-center, so I don't like to just have it like center, you know, parallel, bottom parallel to the bottom, side parallel to the side, side parallel to the side. I kind of like to have it kitty-wampus here, because then as you keep sewing out, it's going to be kind of fun and head towards the corners that way. So I think I kind of like it about, maybe about there. Now before I sew that down, I'm going to get another little scrap. So I've got kind of like little scraps over here kind of in front of my sewing machine that I've been playing with, you know, maybe, and sometimes I even flip it around to the back on some of these pieces. Yeah, I kind of like, maybe like that, maybe, yeah, kind of like that too. I don't know, one of those. So you just can kind of play around with it. I probably overthink it. I mean, it's supposed to just be an abstract. You really shouldn't have to think that hard. But I like to play around. Maybe like, I kind of like that. This might be too wide. I might cut this in half. But you can kind of just start playing around, throwing some scrap pieces on there until you get something that you kind of like. Might use, and again, I use, you know, sometimes if I need like a lighter piece, I'll just flip it over to the back. I'll check and make sure that it's not too scruffy on the back, but this piece looks fine, so this piece would be fine to use the back of, and I might like that better than this side. I might just chop that one in half. So I've got my heavy duty scissors there, so I think I kind of like maybe this piece for there, maybe that one for there. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with that. Again, I probably tend to overthink it and be a little bit too perfectionistic. My grandma is kind of the opposite. She seems like she just throws stuff down and then it winds up looking beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to kind of think about what order I threw them down. So I think I threw this one down first. So I'm going to do right sides together. So I'm just going to fold this over to where right sides are together. And I'm going to sew down, and then I'm just going to immediately turn it and top stitch it. I like to top stitch everything on my blue jean quilts because it helps them lay flatter and nicer. Now I could pin these down if I really wanted to, but again, this is just an abstract rose type quilt, so it's not going to be the end of the world if it's not in a perfect pattern. There, you don't have to worry about precision too much on this one, which is kind of nice. It's kind of a nice, fun, just scrappy quilt. And I also like to begin and end with a back stitch, so I'm going to kind of go forward, and then I am going to back stitch. I like to go right up to the end of my foot. I like a pretty generous seam allowance, especially with blue jeans, because they fray so easily. So I usually go just pretty generous right up to the end of my foot. Alright, so I'm to the end. I'm going to slide these off for a second. Hopefully I can kind of remember. Again, not the end of the world if I don't have those where I'd planned. Okay, now I'm turning this around and I'm flipping this over, and I am going to just immediately top stitch so that it's laying nice and flat. Now when I top stitch, then I get a lot closer to the seam, or to the side. So now you can see, I mean, I'm kind of just barely over the center there, so not much for room there. I'm just going kind of tight along there. Now again, I like to backstitch, so that's when you hit this reverse just to backstitch it a little bit. Just feels like it locks it in better. Okay, and then I'm just going to hand crank this to where my to where this is up, so that I can bring this out. I'm going to use my scissors on that. Okay, so I've got that one done. And then, which one did I have? This one. And I was kind of debating whether that was too, like, wide, but let's just go for it. Now this might be... Sometimes I change my mind, like especially with these fabrics that you don't have a lot of. Usually you don't have a lot of super dark fabric, so I might just see if I have a dark fabric that's a little bit shorter that wouldn't waste, you know, that's not going to waste this part. So, like, here's a dark one. Aha! Oh, except for that one's pretty badly stained. I'm going to see if I can find a darker piece that would not waste so much in my scraps. Like this one I could maybe, you know, I could cut there and then maybe use all of that later. So I think I'm going to cut it to where it just goes from the end to the end where there won't be any waste yet. I don't know, maybe it won't use up this piece very nicely eventually either, but I'm going to trim this a bit. Got a little, again with blue jeans they do kind of unravel, so I like to do a pretty generous seam allowance. Okay, there, I'm going to go with that. So I'm going to put good sides together, and this is okay, you know, just so over the top of that, it's alright if there's a little extra there. So I'm bringing this back up. Again, I like it to just go right along the side of my foot, a nice generous seam allowance because blue jeans fray so bad. And I like to put my needle down, so I just kind of hand crank to where my needle is down, and then I'm going to lift my foot and turn this around and just top stitch this immediately. And lift that up, lift needle up, lift the foot up. And I've got another little piece. Now at this point you might want to turn your iron on, and you could probably get by without ironing, but part of the reason that this is nice, this fusible interfacing, is that you can kind of iron as you go, and it'll kind of, you know, fuse to this and just kind of help keep it straighter and more square. Although I am going to kind of square it up at the end as well, I think. Let's see then, what did I do? Okay. So there's going to be a little waste. And again, sometimes I try to sort through and find a piece that, you know, is just not going to waste any at all. Oh, okay, that's going to be about the same, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, I think I'm just going to use this piece, and yeah, it'll waste a little bit, but that'll go into my daughter's pile for her little scrappy quilt, so not the end of the world. So I think I like this piece with that, so I'm going to fold right sides together, lift my foot up there, bring that up. And again, I like to stay right at the end. I probably didn't need to sew clear to the end on this one because there is going to be quite a lot of extra. So I should have just kind of, I'll probably cut some of that off. my needle up to where it's up, to where this is up here. Lift my presser foot up. Cut this. Okay, so there's quite a bit of extra here. Like I said, I shouldn't have sewn clear to the end because I could give some of this piece to my daughter. You know, I could go give some of that to her. And I might seam rip that out just so that that's not bulky. So this is too small of a piece to use in mine, but again, you know, we can top stitch that onto some bigger scrap piece, and then she could play with that. Okay, I might seam rip this out just so that this isn't all bulky there. I went ahead and did seam rip this a little bit just so I can get that bulkiness out. What I should have done before I sewed it, I should have trimmed my piece to the end, and then I wouldn't have had to deal with that at all. And this, I'll throw it in her scrap pile. Okay, so again, at this point, I think I mean, you could go ahead and fuse this down by just lightly pressing it, or you can keep going with some more scraps, just going around and around. So you just kind of keep working your way around. And sometimes you can kind of press as you go. I'm going to show you what happens when you do get to kind of the ends. So here's one that I've got that is almost done. So like I was working my way out. This one I started with a really small one in the center. So I was working my way out. Now I was going to show you, once you get to where you have pieces off to the side, like you'll wind up with the pieces hanging off over the edge. So what I usually do is I just kind of cut along the side, and then you can see that this was from kind of a narrow, or not a narrow, from a rectangular strip. So I had a rectangular strip here. I trimmed kind of along the back of the interfacing. And then this piece, this little triangle piece, I could actually use, you know, like down here. So what I'll do, and then I've got this other triangular piece kind of again from the same thing. Once you hit the sides, you kind of wind up with a lot of these triangles. So I'm just going to be using these triangles in my corners, like so. Maybe like there-ish. You want to make sure that you don't run out of space. Okay, so I would probably sew it like that. And again, you could pin it if you want, or you can just kind of try to hold it down and get that sewn down. I'll move this for a second. Okay, so I'm going to kind of try to sew it about there-ish. And I'm just going to kind of roll this up so I can get this situated. There we go. And then top stitch immediately. And lift the needle, lift the presser foot, and then I usually just drop it to kind of hold my thread. Okay, so then there is that. Now when I go to square up, you know, some of this is going to get trimmed off, but I guess I could, if I wanted to, I could kind of trim here where there's not any thread. I don't love to cut over the top of my thread until it's really close to being time to sew all the roses together, because I don't want it coming loose. So I'm not going to cut over that quite yet, because I don't want things getting loose before I sew it together. And then, oh, here's my other triangle. And then this one I wanted like here, so I kind of have to imagine how it's going to be folded. I'm just kind of picturing when I fold it with kind of a generous allowance there. There, that should work. And again, you could pin. I'm just going to kind of hold it while I scoot it under here. And then I'm just going to kind of roll the opposite corner so I can get it under the machine. And then immediately top stitch. So there you can see that this one is entirely done. So I didn't, sometimes I start with a square in the middle. This was a quadrilateral, but it was kind of, you know, almost like a trapezoid. I like starting with like trapezoids, or even just a square turned. I've done a few where I start with like a triangle in the middle, and I didn't love that as much. Usually starting with a quadrilateral works best. I see on this one, I started with a pentagon. And I don't love this one as much as the ones that I start with just kind of a quadrilateral. I mean, it doesn't matter, it's abstract, but the ones that I kind of like how they go the best is either just a square, you know, turned in the center, or something not too far off from a square is kind of the ones that I tend to prefer, I think. And again, you can go over to your iron and just kind of, you know, kind of press this down and it'll fuse to the interfacing. It looks like I didn't do that corner yet. So yeah, my corners are still kind of loose, so I could press my corners down just to kind of fuse that together. And that's kind of all there is to that. So again, you'll need 20 of these. So you'll start with your 16-inch square, or about 16-inch square interfacing, and just start in the middle with some scraps and just keep going around and around and around, immediately top stitching as you go. And then you could also lightly press with an iron as you go. Just kind of helps it a little bit, I feel. And once you have 20 of these, we can move on to the next step, which is sewing those 20 together with kind of these connecting strips, which are also, you know, about 16 inches long. And how many inches? I can't even remember now how many inches I decided. 3. I decided to go with 3, but I don't think that part matters too terrible much. I think you'd be fine with like 4 as well, but I think I went with 3 because, again, I kind of like to do generous seam allowances, and I was thinking that would be about a 2-inch border, and I thought I would like the looks of that, about a 2-inch border. So I'm cutting 3-inch by 16-inch rectangles out of kind of my standard Wrangler jean that I've got a lot of the same shade of. And then we will start laying it out and sewing those together how we like.